So, Derrick, thanks for joining us today for a lecture on reproducing small groups in a church. And so, you are a campus pastor with the Summit Church in Raleigh, Durham, and we have already had two other of the pastors there at Summit speak into the class this week on reproducing leaders with Josh Miller, reproducing worship artists with Jonathan Welch. And apparently Summit does decent at reproducing something. So I know you're a beneficiary of that as you're being developed even now to be sent out as a leader in a church planting sense. And so I know that they're investing a lot in you. And so tell us a little bit about kind of what you do at the campus where you're the associate pastor.
Yeah, basically a lot of my responsibilities consist of overseeing small groups, since we are talking about small groups, helping oversee small group, giving them insight on what they should be doing, how they should be structured, what are things, helping them to deal with, different situations that may come up in a small group. But then on top of that as well, I focus on local outreach. What does it look like for our church to be involved in our communities here in Raleigh. And what's awesome is they go hand in hand, because the people who are in small group, they're the ones who are, the most committed, the ones who really are hungry for community, for discipleship, and obviously local outreach, serving. You're never more like Christ than when you are serving. That goes hand in hand. That's an aspect of discipleship. Talking to our small groups about being involved in local outreach. So that's really a lot of what I oversee on a day-to-day basis, outside of your typical, shepherding and pastoral moments that may come up from time to time. So.
Gotcha. You and I have a long history. It was kindergarten, first grade, thereabouts, that we got connected at a little Christian school and graduated there together, came to Piedmont together. Families lived nearby and hung out even in ministry here in Winston, and so it's been really cool to kind of watch you grow, mature into this. Probably, here you and I are doing, and I think this is going to be encouraging for the students in the class watching this. Here are two guys who, in 10th or 11th grade, absolutely no one who knew us would ever say. They'll probably be Skyping one day for a college-level church planting class about reproducing small groups. They're probably like, what prison system are they a part of? How they messed up. So this is God's grace for sure, for both of us.
Sure, because we were a bunch of knuckleheads.
Still are.
Because we don't want to get fired, we won't talk about our stupidity. But
we don't do anything stupid anymore. Thank you for taking your time to discuss this with us. And I recently heard you at our Baptist State Convention conference talk about kind of the small group rhythm in life and kind of what does a small group mission community type idea look like? How does that function? Why does your church do those? And so in this class, we've covered a lot of those already, and I really want to hit today of what is your system or your process for reproducing more groups. So we don't want to just have a church that just has the 10 small groups and they never grow, because when a church grows, naturally the small groups should grow. So just kind of, I would just love for you to kind of walk us through from beginning to end what it's like to really get a new group started out of an existing one.
Yeah. So obviously, like from the beginning, the gospel has to be the foundation for everything. If you stop and think about just what Christ has done in the sense of transforming our lives to the way that now the gospel shapes everything that we do. The way we think about our families, our friends, our time, what we do with our spare time. Our likes, our dislikes, everything. The gospel should completely transform everything, and obviously that includes small groups. Unfortunately, what we begin to see, just like many other churches, you have a lot of people who attend because it meets their needs. They're very consumeristic. We pick the day of the week that works best for our schedule. We pick the small groups that we don't have to drive that far to. We pick the ones that we feel more comfortable with. How the leader teaches. The different things that leader does, he or she makes us feel, all those different things. It's very consumeristic. So our hope is that we move from this consumer mentality of like, what can this small group give me, and move them to, this is what we can give to continue on the mission of God and making disciples. So, we try to think of what is the biggest individual or spiritual need for someone, right? What is that? It's for them to know that Christ has come to die in their place, to live a life that they couldn't live, and truly take on the full wrath of God. And so because that is true, people need to hear that. People need to understand that. Basically, their need for Jesus. So again, our hope is that we move away from the idea of how the small group can meet my needs, but how can I, as a small group, meet the needs of the community, the neighborhood, the city in which I live. So from the beginning, every small group leader has that in mind. The gospel transforms everything. The gospel is everything that we're about. So what we do now is, as we get these small groups, everyone always, we start a small group. Some of them are co-ed. You got your husband-wife team. You've got your young adult, single guy, single girl, leading all guys group, all girls group. You've got all these groups, and you have all these people wanting to come and check them out, right? So as they come, obviously we're not just going to punch them in the face and say, you're a consumer, you're only here because you were asked to be here, shame on you, right? No, it's a process of discipleship. So as they begin to build community in that small group, as they're beginning to fall more in love with the people there, falling more in love with the gospel, what happens? Their lives begins to transform. They see that there is a need for multiplication, for going out and filling the Great Commission. There's something that JD says here quite often. It's actually now one of our plumb lines at the Summit Church, is that the church is not an audience, it's an army. Because as an audience, you come, you're like, okay, what can you give me? Make me feel good right now. But we're trying to move from the idea of that the church isn't an audience, it's an army. We are now moving on mission together. So now, in conjunction with my small group, and this is the model that we try to see for all of our small groups. You mentioned earlier the idea of an apprentice or a co-leader or something. We want to bring these apprentices or co-leaders along with us because our hope is that we're discipling them to again continue on the mission. So, again, I'll talk about my small group. My hope is that I'm discipling my small group in a way that they're going to fall more in love with the gospel. They're going to fall more in love with Jesus, and then from that they move to the sense of being obedient to go and make disciples, and by continuing to multiply the model that we're doing. So again, so what it looks like in my small group as of right now, I have 3 couples right in my small group. That actually live about 15 to 20 miles away from where we live. Now, when they were signing up for a small group or something like that, based off conversations we typically have, we try to place people in small groups pretty close in dynamics with each other.
Geographically speaking.
Yeah, because we want you to affect that community. We want you to be, the church where you are. But specifically, I sought these 3 couples out. Neither of them filled out an info card saying they're interested in a small group. I was just talking to them in church. I got to know them a little bit after a couple weeks, and I asked them, "Hey, are you guys in a small group?" And none of them were. So I automatically invited them to my small group. Now, again, they live 15 to 20 miles away. But we have about 7 to 9 other people that actually live in conjunction to where we are, 3 to 5 minutes away. Now my wife and I, we're discipling everyone in that group. There's no question about that. But we give special attention to these 3 couples that I mentioned, right? And we give them special attention by giving them opportunities to lead from time to time, meaning I step away, and I'm the consumer, if you will, right? So I'm sitting in small group, and I'm like, hey, why don't you this week, like you're preparing the lesson, you're going to talk about what you're going to lead, what we're discussing, you're going to lead us in prayer, you're going to lead our next local outreach event, whatever. I'm taking off my leadership hat and I'm giving it to them.
Mm.
Because it gives them an opportunity to flex their leadership muscles. It gives them an opportunity to, basically when you look at what is it? The text is slipping my mind. But when it talks about the different spiritual gifts that we have, he says, and to some of them apostles, some of them evangelists, some of them
Right.
teachers. I want to be able to teach them, okay, what is your spiritual gift? What has God given you? And now I want you to exercise that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we've been able to see just through conversation in the past, and I've brought them on to be a co-leader or an apprentice because we've seen, some sort of leadership in them already. So now I'm making sure that it's coming out, that they get to see it for themselves. So now, as we do this, this what it's taken place over 6 months to a year, sometimes even longer. But basically, the hope is that as I'm pouring into them, the idea of like, hey, we want you to multiply this or do what we've done so far in our small group, where you are 15 to 20 miles away.
Right. Basically,
Basically,
just
there are other
replicate.
people there are other people in our church who live where you are, who aren't connected in a small group. That there are things happening in your neighborhood, in your community that we can't necessarily affect, but you can. You're starting this small group here. And now none of this is like, I'm not just dropping the ball on them, right? As I'm allowing them to do this, I'm not saying, I'm not coming to them one day and put my arm around them. Hey, I've been doing this for you because we're about to send you off in 2 weeks, so I hope you're ready for that. Like, no, like I've been grooming them for a while with the idea, I've already had a conversation with them. Listen, if we are called to make disciples, if we're called to advance the kingdom here in our city, why can't you do that where you are?
Mm.
Well, I can. Of course you can. And that's why I want you to learn how to do that. So in the next 6 months, I want to plant you off and start a new group over there where you are.
Mm.
And hopefully, obviously, contextualize the gospel in the part of Raleigh where they live. So, at the end of the day, the end goal, it's the same. We want them to make disciples where they are. The methods may change a little bit because obviously they're going to have a different style of leadership than I do. But the hope is that they're bringing now, 2 to 3 other people that they're raising up to go off and,
So really, the leadership development side of it really kind of just happens organically within the
organically.
group.
Yep. Now there are some, we have structured times, if you will. So once a month at every campus we have small group leader training. Right. So those are specifically for our small group leaders. We discuss so many different things, whether it be how to what happens when someone in your small group is speaking heresy, in your group time. How do you address that? So different random things we're discussing. Once you've selected someone to be your apprentice or your co-leader, they're coming to those meetings with you.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that they're leading your group, but you feel comfortable enough to bring them along with you to say, okay, what I'm learning, I want you to learn.
Yeah.
Like, it's everything that I'm absorbing, I want you to be able to practice and do whenever the time comes for us to send you out.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
I like a lot the Dr. Alvin Reed at Southeastern talks about. He calls it the with principle,
Yep.
doing things
Yep.
with them. And I know, and I've heard you talk about your small group how you do discipleship as a with. So your
Mm-hmm.
wife is grocery shopping with other girls in the group to kind of just model. Here's what life with kids looks like, and they're not even married and have kids yet, kind of thing. So there's kind of links of the discipling, but we have to also really make sure that we're discipling next leaders and always identifying and really raising them up. And so I guess for some practical things, you guys you look for multiplying in areas where you have people who are
Mm-hmm.
kind of in a there's a mass of people in a specific area that doesn't have a small group, so why not start there? It seems natural, and
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be lost people where they are, so they'll be able to
Yeah.
engage and multiply that way. You do leadership development both organically, just kind of raising up, giving some ownership, giving roles, letting them kind of test it out. I would imagine that you are personally, as a group leader, always assessing and evaluating. Hey,
Every
yeah,
time we've given them something, like after it's all said and done, I'm grabbing coffee with them or lunch or something, and like, hey, how was that? Like, what are some things that you felt you did well? What are some things you felt you did bad? And obviously I want to affirm as much as possible, but then I also want to correct. Like,
right,
hey, yeah, remember how you said you did that bad? You did do that bad, and this is how you don't do that again.
yeah, yeah. No, that's good because you don't want to send out somebody in that group of three couples on that side of town. You don't want to send them out and none of those can lead a Bible study.
Yeah,
Someone's got to be able to exegete Scripture and understand and be able to explain, so that new believers coming in or unsaved coming in, that sort of thing, can kind of take it out.
sure.
So, and then you guys also provide some more formal training with the
Yep.
weekly meetings and gatherings and that sort of thing. So I think that's. I mean, there's really we can make it more complicated, but it really isn't any more
And that,
complicated than that.
man, yes. Like I think the church as a whole has like wanted to say, okay, like there's got to do this and this and this. And I was like, listen, like it's simple. Be as simple as possible. Like, because once you start adding things onto yourself, that's when it becomes stressful. That's when it leads to burnout. All these different things. Like, listen, man, like. That's why we try to do things as organically as possible. Like you're already doing it, again, like what you said, bring people with you. Like just make it happen.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, like obviously, yes, I'm being intentional. Like, and I feel like a lot of people miss that.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that we're trying to do with them it's all intentional.
Yeah.
Obviously, what's our end goal?
Well,
We want to see
multiplication
them
has to
small.
be intentional. If you don't have part of your small group culture and DNA at your church to involve multiplication, you'll never get there. You will start 5 groups, and in 10 years you'll have 5 groups,
Yep.
because it's not part of your DNA and your structure. But I know with you guys, it is very much involved in the DNA that it's almost understood. It's almost one of those. If you don't want to multiply, you probably won't fit in here at this church, and
Yeah. Well,
that's
it goes even deeper than that. If you don't want to multiply, like, where's your walk with Christ right
there's
now?
a spiritual issue. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
we're
spiritual issue.
called to make disciples. We're not called to satisfy consumers, right?
Well, I don't know. If you make more money at it, maybe not. So and another thing I want to really affirm. I mean, I know that you're a small group leader and you're one of the paid pastors, of your church.
hmm
Um, how many of your small group leaders at just your campus alone are paid pastors at your church?
At my campus alone, so at my campus alone, we only have two paid full time
And how
guys.
many small
Uh,
groups do you guys have?
we have 25.
So 2 out of
25.
25 are paid. So what I'm hearing, here's what I'm getting at, is only not really a trick question, but so 23 of your leaders are average church members who just
Mhm.
have the capacity and ability to lead, and you release them for leadership.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's how multiplication happens. You find it's simple, it's reproducible, and it cannot be completely driven by the paid guys. It has to
Yeah.
become owned by everyone in the church to where anybody can be a small group leader. I think, and that could be a conversation for another day. I know we're getting out of time, but the concept of just communicating, whether it's from the pulpit or even through the small groups, that hey, average Joe sitting in the pew, you can be a small group leader.
Yeah.
What's stopping you?
Yeah.
If you have a strong walk with the Lord, that every disciple should, you like people, you're able to host, you're able to, lead a
hmm
Bible study, kind of coordinate some things. You can be a leader. It's not
Yep.
a 10 hours a week job. It's you're
Yeah.
you're leading a small family, a small
Yep.
group, and anyone can really do it. And so I think built into the DNA of if you want to reproduce small groups, if you want to reproduce churches, whatever it is, we have to, and I know you and some would agree, it has to be led by the laity. It has to
Sure.
be everyone else in the church has to own this, and the equippers like you and the other pastor, your role is to Ephesians 4:12 equip these small
Mhm.
group leaders so they can lead and multiply more small groups.
Yeah, I mean, you see that even in the early church. The majority of your people in Acts that were, the church planners that were doing, these massive churches they weren't, they weren't Paul's, right? They
He
weren't
got
they
them
weren't the
started.
heavy
He got them
hitters.
started
They
and
were
left. Yeah,
regular Joes.
yeah. Well, that's the cool thing. I think that's how I was reading a really neat book over the weekend about kind of church planting movements happening in North America, and right now they're not.
Mm.
But we're starting to get close to that when we have churches that are multiplying small groups in their city pretty
Yeah.
rapidly, and really
Yeah.
seeing that. That's the closest mini version of a church planting movement. But each of those, 25 groups cannot be led by a guy who's being paid
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
pastor. Has to be so. Well,
Man,
Derek,
I would love to be a co-leader. Like that's
hmm,
in all seriousness, like that's my goal is to be a co-leader and help support somebody else.
yeah.
Because I think a lot of people automatically assume like, well, that's the pastor; he's supposed to do it. It's like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm
Yeah.
actually sitting under the leadership of somebody else.
Right, right. Well, as we close, do you remember your very first week of your campus existing, how many small groups did you have the very first week?
Man, we brought over with us. It was right. We had maybe 5 or 6 small groups.
And how many years ago was that?
Yeah, that was literally not even 2 years ago. It will be 2 years in January.
So in not even 2 years, you've multiplied from 5 to 25.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
this is exactly why I wanted you to speak into this lecture. So you are now the Piedmont expert on reproducing small groups because your church has done it. Many churches, their small groups they're losing small groups, and some are kind of dying off. They're not able to multiply, and so man, it's encouraging to see you guys doing that. And man, thanks for taking your time today to
Yeah,
discuss this with us. Very helpful for not only me. I'm benefiting. I go back and watch these just to kind of learn and take some more deeper notes for myself. I know it's a blessing to our students. So thanks for your time today, buddy.
Hey, man. Anytime, Dustin. I appreciate it, man.
Man.